The purpose of this video is to show you how to install a strain gauge on the shaft of a extension for a wrench. You could also do this if you have a flat plate. This will actually work better if it's flat. So the issue installing a strain gauge on a curved surface, one downside is you have to kind of pre-strain the gauge to get it to curve around the surface. It's not a huge deal, but if it's a very narrow surface, a better way to do this is probably to mill the surface flat. But so what I have is I pre-sanded. I just like 2 minutes ago sanded this the shaft of this wrench extension. So you can see where we didn't get all the way down. It would take a lot of sanding to get those little pits out. But bare steel, I wiped it with alcohol. You really want the surface to be clean and freshly sanded, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get a good bond to the actual steel itself, and steel very quickly forms oxides and forms oils and gets carbohydrates on the surface. So you want to always wear gloves while you're doing this, and you want to make sure it's freshly sanded, and then do a wipe with alcohol afterwards. Be sure not to touch it with bare hands. You're going to get oils on there if you do that. So when we're ready, now I put when we have this wrench extension, this is the end where the bits, where the socket extension is going to go. This is the end where it connects to the wrench. I'm going to sand a spot. It doesn't really matter where we put it along the shaft, because you're going to get about the same torque all the way along. As long as it's the same diameter, you should get about the same torque all the way along it. But if you do it close to where it connects to the wrench, you don't have long wires going all the way to the socket extension. So I kind of put it close to this side, sanded it smooth, alcohol clean, wearing gloves. And this will get us started with the, now it's not wanting to balance for me. Now this will get us started with the strain gauge. So these are the strain gauges right here. These strain gauges, they're delicate, they're sensitive, and basically until they get glued on, they're fairly sensitive. So you, again, handle them with gloves, use tweezers, hold them delicately. You don't want to damage the actual, so you can see inside there, maybe you can see inside there, the actual little, there's little sort of interdigitated fingers there, or not interdigitated, but there's narrow little fingers in there where the strain actually gets measured. There's like 20 of them or something like that. So we're going to take these and we're going to get some tweezers. And we're also going to make sure the tweezers are clean. And we're going to pull one of these out. So these are in kind of a little protective pouch that's folded over. Oh, let's grab from the top, I guess. So they're in this little protective pouch. You pull one of these out. We'll grab, we don't want these things to overlap or get crushed or damage each other, so we'll just pluck one out here. Set it there. So you can see when you look at these strain gauges, there's the side that gets glued and the side that's the exposed surface. The side that has the pads that are nice and shiny and metal, that's the part that has to stay on the outside. The back side that we glue, you can see here, it's just this Kapton. So the back side is just this brown polymer. We can't solder the pads on that side. We can solder the pads on that side. So when we glue it, we have to glue it with this side facing out. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to tape this strain gauge. We're going to attach the strain gauge to a piece of tape. This whole time we're doing this process, everything needs to be clean. So we don't want to get hairs in there. We don't want to get dust. We don't want to get soot. We don't want to get sanded stuff. So clean tape. A lot of times with tape, the issue is if the tape roll has been sitting there, that little couple inches of tape that's been exposed to the air has collected dust and hair and things like that. We don't want that, so we want to pull the tape. We want to pull like maybe a couple inches of tape off and throw them away, and then use the fresh stuff that just came off the roll. And tape, again, tape will very quickly in time start to accumulate dust. So we're going to take our piece of tape that's clean, and now we don't want to stretch the tape. We don't want to be putting forces on the tape. If we stretch the tape, it's going to have an issue where it's going to be pre-strain the strain gauge. So without stretching the tape too much, we're just going to gently put this down on the clean surface. And touch it to the strain gauge, and now the strain gauge is on the tape. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the strain gauge and we're going to align it. Sorry, keep it. I'm gonna try to keep it in focus here. So we're going to try to align it just kind of vertically. Also, not trying to stretch it. We don't want to stretch it. We'll just put it like that. And I'm only going to press down this backside, just one little stripe down the backside. It's a curved surface, it's a little weird. One little stripe on the backside. Then I'm going to pull this back. So now I'm going to pull this tape back a little bit. I'm going to kind of fold the back of the tape so it holds itself backwards. See, so now you kind of see I kind of folded the tape back. So now it's holding itself backwards. So now the back side that we're going to glue of the strain gauge is exposed. This bare surface of the metal is exposed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some accelerant on the back side. So this is the super glue accelerant. Super glue is a cyanoacrylic adhesive. It's really great. That's just what we're going to use for gluing. So the accelerant is going to allow this to cure very quickly. So to apply this to the back, I'm going to take a Kim wipe. A Kim wipe is not the same as a Kleenex. It's not the same as a Q-tip. These Kim wipes are a special lint-free material. So if you're using a Kim wipe, the Kim wipe should not leave lint on the surface that you rub with it. So using this Kim wipe, I'm going to get a little spritz of the accelerant like that. Now the tip of the Kim wipe is wet. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently, it does not take much, I'm just going to take this Kim wipe and I'm going to gently just rub it on the back of the strain gauge. So you see the back of the strain gauge kind of gets a little shiny. Just putting a little bit of that on the back there. And what this is going to do is this is just going to, you know, it has a catalyst that helps the super glue. You know, like when you touch your fingers together with super glue, it instantly bonds. That's because you have a similar catalyst on the surface of your skin. So we're basically making this, you can see it'll slowly dry off there. We're just getting a little film of that accelerant on the back of the strain gauge until it's dry. We're going to let it dry off, and so that thing will finish drying off. And while it's doing that, we're going to take just super glue. This is Harbor Fruit. It's a fancy French store, Harbor Fruit. And we're going to take just where the strain gauge is going to go. So the strain gauge, you can see it's spaced about 1/2 centimeter there from the edge of the tape. So where it's going to end up when we actually glue it, we're just going to put a little drop of glue. It doesn't take much, so we're just going to spread around a thin little drop of glue right where that strain gauge is going to go. The strain gauge should kind of push the glue the rest of the way. Okay, now we do want to make sure there's enough glue to cover the whole area. So now we have the super glue there. We have our strain gauge in place with a tape. This part's very critical and very quick. I'm gonna, without stretching it, I'm gonna push it flat and then hold it with my thumb. So I'm gonna, without stretching it too much, I'm gonna put it flat and then hold thumb pressure. You're gonna hold thumb pressure for 2 minutes now. So holding it with your thumb, if you don't have gloves on, it's okay to not have gloves on for this part, but you don't wanna let up. So have your whole thumb covering the strain gauge, apply good pressure. It's a little hard on a curved surface, but if you got a fat thumb like me, it's pretty easy. If you don't have a glove on, you wanna make sure your fingernail turns white. You wanna be applying enough pressure that you're cutting off blood, but you don't want to let up. So once you put this down, you want to hold it down there for 2 minutes. So for me on my video, it's going to be when the video hits 10 minutes is when I'm going to stop. So there's a temptation to like slide your thumb back and forth to, lift up and see how it looks. Don't do that. Just hold pressure. Make sure your thumb is covering the whole area. Hold pressure. And the idea here is when this is done, we should have only a very thin layer of super glue underneath the strain gauge. The nice thing about super glue these acrylic adhesives, they form a very hard final glue. If the glue itself is too stretchy, if you use something like a rubber cement, the problem is even if you had strain in the metal, that rubber cement would decouple the strain gauge from the metal. You don't want a decoupling surface. You want a rigid, solid, hard surface in between, a thin hard surface like super glue. But if you don't apply this pressure, you're likely to get raised areas of the strain gauge. Raised areas that are separated from the surface of the steel will decouple from the surface of the steel. They will mechanically decouple, so the strain at the gauge will be less than the strain at the actual steel. So we're holding this in place. We're almost there to the 2 minute mark. Okay, we've hit 2 minutes now. it should be good. So we can lift up, and yeah, well, it looks like I was holding a little off to the side. That's okay. It looks like it got it okay. But yeah, so that's the final strain gauge there. Yeah, I was kind of, I think it's fine. I think it's fine. If it's not fine, what are we going to do about it now? So now what we're going to do is we're going to peel the tape back gently. We don't want to rip the strain gauge as we do this. So we're going to peel the tape back. I kind of like to pull back, not pull up. So have that sharp angle there. It's gonna look a little nasty where the super glue was, and that's fine. Sometimes I like to kind of pull it at an angle. When it hits the corner of that strain gauge, hit it at an angle so it doesn't pull the strain gauge up. Oops. Keep pulling it back, keep pulling it back. Okay, there we go. So now that strain gauge is properly adhered to the surface of the steel. So now what we're going to do is we're going to give this at least an hour. So we're going to let this sit for at least an hour to let that super glue completely fully harden all the way across there. And then after an hour, we're going to come back and we're going to solder things on. But right now, the good thing is the strain gauge right now is basically very safe in the sense that it's now mechanically attached to the steel. There's not really anything other than manipulating the steel. There's nothing you're going to do that's going to flex or damage the strain gauge right now. So it's kind of on there. That's a successful strain gauge application. And thank you for watching.